All right, so let's get started. We're going to talk about the new courses we have coming up. We're going to bounce some questions off of our guests today, and we'll hopefully give you guys more knowledge about everything that's going on in the meantime. So here we go. Today, it's going to be our guests, Deepak, William, Simon, and myself hosting it. To get to know us just a little bit more, let's run through this real quick. First things first about CG Spectrum, we're an online school. We specialize in visual effects, digital art, and game design. We're a rookies certified school. We're also an Unreal academic partner, and we're specialized with job-focused training and just general education. So we have beginner courses all the way to advanced diplomas. We're taught by industry mentors in small groups. It can be one-on-one or even up to sessions with 4 people. So it's very hands-on, and it's very one of those moments where you get the attention and you get the direct contact that you deserve. Who am I? So I'm the acting director of creative director of the Rookies. I'm also a game development producer of education for Epic Games, specifically with Unreal Engine and games. I'm a foundations mentor at CG Spectrum, and I've been doing games for about 20 years now. So I started off on PlayStation 1. I'm old. Along the way, I've worked on some games like the Tony Hawk series, Mortal Kombat, and Kingdom Hearts. But I've been using Unreal for a long time. Deepak, another fellow mentor with us at CG Spectrum. Deepak also works with me at Epic Games, and he's in charge of the TV, film, and virtual production education using Unreal Engine. He's worked at many different studios. He teaches it at many different places, including UT Austin on the side. He's kind of known for being the guru of VFX rendering and just all over virtual production film magic man with Unreal. We have William Faucher, pronounce it right for me.
Faucher.
Faucher, nice. It's fancy. So William's, if you haven't heard of William lately, then you've been under a rock. He's just blowing up in terms of just taking over the CG world. We have him here as a mentor at Unreal over at CG Spectrum, and he actually works with Deepak and myself at Epic, creating content for us there. He's been working in the industry over 12 years. He specializes in real-time training, as well as being an Unreal artist. He's worked on credits such as Black Panther, Watchmen, and many, many more. He's really, really good. So I'm excited to have him on. And then we have the Godfather himself, Simon Warwick. There's a W in there. He's worked in the gaming industry about the same, almost as long as I have, like all over the place. So he's worked over at one of my favorite studios, Rock City Studios, on the Batman Arkham City games, as well as other ones. He's really proficient on Unreal, Maya, 3ds Max, After Effects, and he's our department head at CG Spectrum. So we have to be nice to him. I'm just joking. So let's kind of like jump into it. I know we have limited time on such a broad topic, so obviously please rewatch this afterwards. It's recorded, but feel free to always ask questions afterwards by just contacting the school in general. So what is virtual production? I'm sure a lot of us have been hearing that term, especially if anyone's been watching The Mandalorian. If you haven't, you should watch it. That's really we started to hear the big push of what virtual production is. So quick question. I'm going to go to you first, Deepak. Oh, he's muted. Deepak, what is virtual production to you?
So to me, what's interesting about it is I consider virtual production pretty analogous with practical physical production. So given that my background is in traditional filmmaking and I sort of entered this world of VFX, virtual production, emergent cinema, and all this stuff a little bit later on in my career, to me, when I teach it, especially in an academic sense, what I'm trying to do is trying to basically showcase the similarities between creating content in both different realms. And so to me, a lot of what virtual production is, not limited to, but a lot of what it is taking practices and techniques and stuff that we do in, practical production, importing those values and properties and variables and all sorts of those things into our software to create, in sometimes physically accurate renderings, but also just the discipline of filmmaking with a capital F translates a lot into this realm. So to me, that's really what it is. It's finding the common ground between these two different ways of doing things and creating content, completely opposite ways of doing things, but utilizing the strengths and the familiarities of each to create content in the virtual production realm. So it's not just, of course, volumes like the LED volume. We'll talk about this more later, I'm sure, but it's like conceptually virtual production has been around for quite a long time, right? It's just, of course, reaching the forefront due to a lot of things like democratization of the software and the processes.
And the Mandalorian.
And the Mandalorian, yeah, of course. Yeah.
All right, cool, very cool. And to kind of bounce on to William, I'm sure you've been using Unreal for a while. How do you see it being used in terms of this switch from Unreal to like Unreal being used for virtual production? I know because we have different topics such as film production and filmmaking, but where are you seeing it the most, do you think?
I think Unreal is such an exciting change because with things change, I mean, it's going so fast. I mean, you take a look at when Unreal Engine 4 came out, what, 5 or 6 years ago? It was not, I don't think it was designed with this in mind. I think things have changed so quickly, so fast, and it's going in a really exciting direction. Now we can use it to not only get really great imagery very quickly, but we can use it to help filmmakers kind of visualize what they're seeing as they're shooting, right? So it's not only that, but like especially if you have like LED screens, it also helps actors. It helps concept artists as well, because now concept artists can use the Megascans library, and with Unreal Engine 5, lighting gets so fast and it's so efficient. So coming up with ideas and getting your ideas out there is faster than it ever has been. And I like to kind of compare it to the days of analog versus digital photography, where learning photography on analog was very time consuming because you had to wait 2 weeks before seeing your result, getting at your actual print. And now, when you went to a digital camera, you get live feedback. You can learn from your mistakes much quicker. And the same thing is happening now. Before, with offline rendering, things were extraordinarily slow. And now, you can get a proof of concept up and running in a few hours, which is unheard of. And so this is completely groundbreaking and super exciting for artists and people who are just who've never done 3D in their life. Things are just getting easier and easier to use, much more user-friendly, much more artist-friendly than ever before. And so I think there's going to be a big push for people who've never done 3D in their life and who might want to start using this now. So it's exciting times.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned actually like the talent of it. I mean, I worked on a lot of film sets, and it's, I've been on the sets for one of the more bigger Harry Potter worlds. I was the Fantastic Beasts stuff. And I remember walking on the sets, and there'd be 2 types of sets. There'd be the one that was the actual physical location that was built out, and the actors really got to feel that tangible touch of feeling things. And then you walk into these other areas, and these big areas of just green. And it's impossible at this point. And you're like, when you're trying to, and even with the bigger like blockbuster movies we've seen in the last like 10, 15 years, this use of green screen, it's like the imagination they have to have is crazy. And everything's usually done post. But now I remember watching the documentaries and actually seeing physical sets myself of these first production LED sets. And you walk into there and it's like, there's this combination of the practical set that's inside, but then that virtual set that's live, that's there, that makes that person feel like they really are in space or on an island. And it's crazy because it reacts to the lighting too. So if you move that light around, the light rigs move too, and you're like, what? And it changes the way that the talent sees it. So it's not only going to be something that's fun from our standpoint as developers, but it's going to change the way that actors actually and the directors and talent, all these people who aren't more technical minded, they're going to see that. I guess that kind of highlights some of these other things we're talking about in terms of it being used more than just filmmaking and screen production, installations and projections for events, marketing commercials. I just see it being used for so many more things. So moving forward, we're kind of like starting to talk about the day, like real-time 3D, like what does an artist really do? The day in the life of a real-time virtual production artist. Now, I kind of want to talk to you first on this, Simon, like because you're coming from things like using Unreal, and you're starting to dabble more into virtual production. But you're like myself, where we have a strong background in the gaming aspect of it. And like, how are you seeing your skill sets as using Unreal as from a game development side, kind of approaching to the virtual production side? Like, where do you see that change?
I mean, there's when you get into Unreal 5, you're seeing some serious change going on. it's interesting how it like my background comes from animation, so I have been working with character rigs and getting them working in game and making them look correct and everything for years and years. But the strategy that Unreal's doing with the change, they're going from Unreal 4 to Unreal 5, and the way that they're changing how the workflow is potentially going, um, is really interesting, and also like you really have to reinvent everything you're thinking about. What traditionally you've thought about before, you have to be like, okay, well, it doesn't have to be that way anymore. What else can we do with it? And so, and I think that's true for all the different departments, that we're all kind of trying to figure out why, what can we do with this new capability, and where can we go with it, because it's not just the same old road anymore. And what's really neat about this panel, especially, is that we all have like a different talent. We all have a different ability, and we're all together trying to solve this puzzle together. And that's what makes this course really neat too, because we know that you can't just find one person who knows everything. You have to find it. You have to get pieces of knowledge from various people. So we lay out the course so that each term is mentored by different people who have different specialties, and you're just pulling everything you can from each of these people to find that final goal. We don't even know what the final goal is. Like you were talking before about how like production can be, there's the traditional virtual production sets, but then I've had lots of questions from students saying, I have a background in staging and like, working in theater, and like, can I use Unreal to solve this? Can I enhance the experience for the audience? And it's like, yeah, you totally can. I mean, it's really up to your creativity to figure out how are you going to introduce a virtual element into a real world element.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like you really hit the nail on the head in terms of like what is the difference between the more traditional workflows versus the virtual ones. Like I guess the tried and true craft of like working on stage, like an actual theater thing. It's like, how can you use that in a real-time event? It's like, so I guess it comes down to the fact that like we can fake a lot of stuff to make these effects happen real time, as opposed to having that green screen and then going back to like these fancy virtual production, or sorry, VFX studios to do that stuff at post. It's like there's this ability now to make it all real time, which is pretty exciting. And Deepak, what would you say? I mean, you've got a really good, like you've done some stuff before with virtual production. Like, what would you say a typical day would be like, or not even day per se, like process for you as
Sure.
in a virtual production set?
Yeah, so like I had mentioned before, I'm coming from the traditional filmmaking side of things. So I'm used to working in a much smaller environment in terms of creating stuff like this. Not at, let's say, a large company with dozens and dozens of employees. Like a lot of the work that I've done in emergent and immersive is myself and a couple others. Like honestly, even on larger projects that I've been a part of. But in general, for somebody like me who's coming from the film side, I'm usually using like the virtual production techniques that I'm using, especially lately, is for pitch visualization and pre-visualization on projects. So what that looks like for me is it's taking the screenplay I'm currently working on. I've created a shot list. I have the strip board. I have even thumbnail sketches that I'm utilizing as sort of reference, like for my boards. And what I do from that is I sort of then start generating the imagery for my film inside of the engine. And what's great about that for a person like me is, over the years, I've accumulated enough skills to be competent in many different areas, right? So I consider myself the, practical filmmaking generalist, but also a virtual production filmmaking generalist. And what I can do, and what virtual production really helps me out as, especially because I'm in the middle of producing a short right now. It's going to be 100% virtual production using metahumans inside of Unreal 5. And all the work that I'm putting into the pre-visualization and the layout and even, character blocking, lighting, camera choices, all that sort of stuff, I'm not wasting any time necessarily, because every single thing that I do can be used in production if I want, because I'm in the same ecosystem from, my 0 point of the project, right? When I actually get into a computer, I'm not switching between multiple different DCCs. And that's not just limited to Unreal Engine. Obviously you can do this sort of work in other programs. Blender has the real-time viewport and all that sort of stuff as well. But for me as a creator without like a hugely dedicated background, I come from visual effects as well, but I was mostly a compositor, right? So I was used to taking other people's assets and putting them together to create the final shot. Inside of this environment, though, like I think Will had mentioned too, the idea that like, you can just create so fast, right? That is what my day looks like. At the end of the day, I'm kicking out shots, like, not just stills. Like I can actually have things in motion. I'm working off my home computer. Like I'm not on some crazy, I mean, relatively speaking, it is a good machine. I shouldn't say, don't want to hurt its feelings, but it's not like an insane 20 grand computer, right? This is basically a souped up gaming rig. And I couldn't have done that a couple of years ago. Like I've been teaching Unreal at UT specifically for filmmaking since 2015. And, I sort of got in a little bit early there because I was essentially just looking for online workflows where I could do things in real time, because my students at the time didn't have the necessary skill set to be asset creators. So we were essentially kit bashing, sequencing, putting stuff together, and really understanding how cinema works in a virtualized way. So for me, that's what my process is. I'm just taking my previous skills, I'm applying them inside of this environment. And so what a day looks like for me is it's usually a single day can be very productive, because I can actually go from ideation to like a final looked at frame or something. And I was not able to do that in the past. So really this ecosystem really enforces that sort of, like, I like to call it like rapid creative iteration. Like you just keep going, keep iterating. If somebody gives you a note or a change, you're not like, man, we got to go all the way back through the pipeline. It's like, okay, let me just go there and do it right now. What you see is what you get in the viewport. And, it just encourages you also to experiment a little bit more. I think because you're not afraid of losing time.
Yeah. And William, when you're creating your stuff too, like Deepak, are you guys leveraging any internal content like through Quixel Bridge or any of that stuff?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So realistically, if you're creating a scene, how much of your time is actually spent creating raw assets as opposed to using content you find online?
So for me, I am not ashamed to admit this. 99% of what I use is stuff I'm not creating. Like the same way if I'm making a film, right? When I do commercial work or my own film live action work, after watching my work, nobody ever comes up to me and says, hey, Deepak, did you build that car? Or did you hand stitch that wardrobe? Nobody ever says that, right?
Oh yeah, and at that point, you just make sure you're creating content because you're
exactly
absolutely actually the asset creation. It's more or less staging it and making sure it fits the storyboards and the animatic.
Absolutely, and that's not to say that you can't be an asset creator getting into this. Like it's just that I think the barrier to entry to start creating immediately is because all these things have been democratized. It's like you have places like Kitbash 3D2 where like it might seem expensive if you're going to spend $150 on an asset pack, but think about how much work that's gone into that, and then think about how much of your time it would take, right, to learn that skill set, make assets of that quality, and then deploy them. It's like unquestionable that like if that's what you want to do, that's great. But we're living in this virtual production ecosystem where it's like, I mean, you can remix, kit bash, all sorts of stuff. And then you just get to focus purely on like what you want to do within that realm, right? Whether it's, just honing the overall aesthetic or focusing, like what I teach my students at UT, like still bringing the story into a part of the project. Like it's much more doable in that sense.
So question for you, Will, how important do you think it is for content creators to understand the basics of Unreal Engine?
Pretty important, obviously. But fortunately, the learning curve in Unreal is not that bad, especially when it just comes to just establishing a layout, getting stuff out there. That's not hard. Unreal has a lot of weird things when it comes to, so little technical things that you need to know about when it comes to time to create a final result. But actually creating something, just getting some props out there, hooking up the Quixel Bridge, getting some mega scans, and starting at creating a landscape, that's pretty easy. Like the learning curve is not that steep. You just kind of need to know how. And if anything, it's probably an advantage for someone who doesn't have any 3D experience at all, because then they don't need to like relearn how to walk again. Like I've known a lot of artists who've come from Maya or 3ds Max or whatever, and they've been using offline renders like Arnold and V-Ray for 10, 20 years, and then they get into Unreal and they're just like, what the heck?
Yeah, I know.
They're completely lost. And they're like, what? And like, these are veterans of the industry, people who've been working for so long. Like it is a humbling experience to be around them. And then they're back in kindergarten. They have no idea what's going on. And so it's often hard to unlearn decades of processes. So if anything, I think it's almost easier for someone with absolutely no 3D experience to get into Unreal and get a nice result, because they don't have to unlearn anything.
Yeah, at that point, it really becomes about like your understanding of aesthetics and using reference. This, like,
Exactly.
how deep is your problem solving and creative skill set? Cool. All right. So here's a good question. Why is there such demand for real-time artists in film and games? I mean, beyond the general of, it seems to be a huge shift these days into the virtual production set, but why do you think that is? Let's go with Simon.
Why do I think there's such a demand for
Yes.
real time?
Yeah.
Well, I think a big part of it is because we're actually able to produce footage that's almost photorealistic and get it in a frame rate that's just insanely fast. So it hasn't been that long since we've had hardware that can support this. And as soon as that became open and you can do it on a computer that doesn't require like, you know, a massive NASA machine, it's suddenly like, hey, why don't we just put this on a screen and then use it as our backdrop? And it only just was a couple of years ago that someone actually tried it, and it's amazing. And it won't be long in the future before this is very, you know, reasonable for every average people to set up these types of sets. So, and the tool set that you have to know is a real time world. So, and like Will was talking about just a few minutes ago, like it's totally different workflow than what you're doing from a traditional rendering standpoint. But it's the workflow that we're familiar with when we're making video games. And so it's interesting to see how those worlds are combining. And now when we're getting to Unreal 5 and stuff, it's like we're suddenly like getting so much good stuff coming from real time that it's just like, I can't believe you can actually do this. And it still runs at 60 frames a second.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy because coming from games and building content to be efficient and run, me transitioning to virtual production from content creation has been a breeze. So I'm like, oh, it's great. I use Unreal, it's what it is. But there is that aspect of like that kind of change, because as a game developer, you're trying to create content where the player's in control of the camera, and you never know how close they're going to get to something, how much they're going to run up to something. Like there's these unknowns that you have. But if we go back to taking that same like optimization, just building how you make content for games, but now we're like, all right, cool. Well, hey, take away all those under wonders. You can just have it with set locations. I remember Deepak showing me one of your actual scenes, and like when you turn it to this, like looking at it in each of the shots looks amazing. When you turn it to the side, you're like, whoa, it's like missing. It's like literally like an actual.
Right. Yeah. It's like, I mean, it's totally what I would do if I was on a soundstage and I was moving flats around, right?
Yeah.
Like I would plan for the shot, I'd have it boarded out. In some cases, I might have drawn an overhead. Like for practical physical production, we would have had our PD elements in there, and you know, we would have put the walls up. But like, yeah, like if you take a step outside of the camera, the illusion falls apart. And I think, you know, there's ways in which you can work that way inside of Unreal and other platforms, and you know, you get the results similarly just as fast, but you're making really specific creative decisions way in advance, which is kind of what I like about this too. You know, when a lot of the times when, you know, especially on commercial work that I've done, when we utilize green screen, you know, the pre-pro, if you will, like, I mean, it's just not sufficient. People aren't communicating well enough. You know, it's always a big what if, like, how are these things going to line up when we actually execute it in post? And with virtual production practices, if departments want to unify in pre-production, they can, right? And what's nice about that, and what I think, you know, when I talk to people in the VFX industry, and some of them are worried about where this is going, my point to them is like, well, you actually get to have a little bit more control earlier on in the process if you're the vendor that is going from point A to B of the production, right? Because your assets, you know, will need to be done, creative decisions will need to be made. You actually have, unless, you know, something goes catastrophically wrong during the shoot, you have less of the possibility of scope creep if you're solidifying everything in pre-production as well, which is something that really,
you don't have to take big shots, because it's like you're not guessing where something's being grabbed
right.
up. He's right here.
Yeah. And I think what that allows, you know, to happen too, like, you know, and this is why there's a demand, and more creatives are realizing this, right? Especially in the film industry, right? And, you know, to go to the question of like, is there a shortage of artists in this field? It's like, I would say it's more like, you know, there's enough artists out there. It's about like getting people acclimatized to this new sort of paradigm shift in terms of our workflow, right? There's definitely talented people out there. They just have to be onboarded into these sort of new techniques, including being involved way earlier in a production than they might have normally been used to, right? Especially the people who are conceptualizing, right? You can take the concept now and actually put that into production if it's all within the same environment, which is something that we're not normally familiar with, right? Especially those of us who had worked way in the past, like my first previous gigs were play blasts in Maya, right? So, I mean, they barely had any, bearing on the actual reality, right? And I would get made up lens values and stuff that I was told to put in, like, all these sort of things, like, as Simon was saying, the convergence of industry is happening. We're actually finding that a lot of the tools for interactive media creation are like, incredibly valuable for linear media creation. And it's kind of a shame that we haven't had this sort of democratized convergence happen much earlier.
It's kind of cool too, because you mentioned something like if we just say there's two departments that get a piece of concept, like the virtual department can be off and running, creating that set in 3D, while the actual physical production set is as well. So there's no time being wasted. And with that, those two sets being completely made and like having that clear direction on top of like, getting their storyboards and animatics, then it's like you save time on the shots. There's a bookend of virtual production and VFX on there, but it's nowhere near like it used to be. Because back in the day, everything used to be so front loaded where we would just be creating these massive physical sets. And then there was little work in the back end. And then it changed to being super small in the beginning with all the green screen and just massive VFX shots in the back end. Now it's like we're kind of like splitting the difference, and there's like a little, we get like it's a nice half and half. So having said that, I mean, I agree with you that I don't think that there necessarily is a shortage of artists. I think there's a shortage of understanding how their skill sets translate into that virtual production pipeline. But what kind of skills would you say that these employers are looking for? William, what do you think about that one?
Oh, skills that employers are looking for? That's a broad question.
Well, from your standpoint, if you were to hire someone to help you with a virtual production project, let's just say you got a freelance gig and someone's asking to hire it, who would you want to hire to help you with this, and what skills would they want to have?
Someone with a good, strong background in the foundations of art in general, like either like a good DOP or something, because anyone can just learn the software, right? That's not the major hurdle anymore, because that learning curve is not so much of a hurdle as it used to be before. Like previously, like try to get some 60-year-old DOP to and by DOP I mean director of photography, to learn how to render in V-Ray. Like, good luck, you're gonna have a bad time. But now you can kind of just show them like, hey, you can light your shots this way. And a 60-year-old director of photography or filmmaker, they're going to have 50 plus years of experience making movies. They got a good eye for composition, they got a good eye for framing, they got a good eye for lighting. You won't need to explain to them why, you won't have to explain light to them at all. They're going to know what to do, and the software is just going to be there to help them out even more.
Yeah, it's another tool that extends off it. It's like, imagine, I'm a big fan of anything that David Fincher does, and specifically like his cinematographer that he works with and his lighting artist. It's like, imagine just giving them those tools and be like, hey man, here's what the tool does, here's what it is. Go make something for a week and just show me what you got. And you're going to see them using the tools. And essentially that's what Unreal is. It's another tool set. And if you have these skill sets that you're mentioning in terms of like the basics understanding of like film and like, Deepak talking about just having those traditional film skills, but also design principles, understanding composition, lighting, values, color theory, all those things are going to make that tool, which is Unreal or Maya or any of these things, just more powerful. That's cool. So being more specific, Simon, if you were to hire someone, like what specifically, like skill set wise within Unreal, would you like someone to have? But just give me like one or two.
Well, coming from an animation background, there is some very specific requirements with rigging and bringing characters in and working with them. And I think that is I don't know, it's overlooked usually. Like, oh yeah, I got a character working in a game engine. It's like, okay, great. But you don't realize how many like restrictions and how many workarounds you have to do to make that happen. And the fact that like we're introducing control rigs inside of Unreal nowadays, which means you're doing the rigging in the engine, is like, whoa, that's a real paradigm shift for what we've been traditionally thinking about how to do games. and real-time stuff. So I think that skill set is a rare commodity. And I know personally, technical animators are hard to find and, in demand. So in this course, the first term or the introduction term, we definitely get into talking about how to bring characters into the Unreal and talk about joints and rigging and basics and just really start to have that conversation with people, because most projects that I've ever seen people work on, they hit this wall of like, how do I get this to do that in here? Like, how do I get my thing over here in Maya to do that same thing over here in Unreal? And there's so many ways you can do it wrong. And there's so many frustrating hitches that it's nice to have that conversation and start explaining and talking about retargeting, talking about motion capture and how that can work, and sort of build that up to make a useful skill set for somebody. So it's been a priority for us to make sure that we have that conversation with, even if you're interested in something that may not be related, it's good to have that basis to really to be able to understand those challenges that are ahead.
Very cool.
Just to kind of touch base on what you're saying, that specific topic you're talking about is extraordinarily hard to find documentation on. It's not just something you can just quickly Google or just, find some quick tutorial on how to do it. Like there's so much technical stuff that only a mentor can really teach you. There's no way around it. You can probably figure it out on your own, but it's not going to be a fun time.
Yeah. I think that's the kind of benefit, again, of working with people like William, Deepak, Simon, and myself, is that, with new technology comes new documentation, comes new processing pipelines, comes this, there is a lot of content out there. And it's kind of like with anything you see on the internet. Do you trust it? Do you not? Do we take the material ourselves and we try to troubleshoot it? Are we using it in our professional lives? Those things, it actually speeds up the problem solving aspect of using a new pipeline and new software. But I think overall, beyond the stuff that we're going to be covering and talking about what we're going to be teaching in the course, it is really, really good to realize that virtual production and anything just technical always comes from everything always stems from those strong skills, such as understanding different types of lenses, the different film angles, that just being able to read a script and break that down to actual shots, being able to take something from a storyboard to animatic and recreate it in an efficient way. Because like Deepak said, depending on what you want to do inside of these industries, you most likely won't be doing content creation. You most likely will have to be able to take a piece of concept and work it from the set, from these set lists and these actual storyboards, to recreate it as quick as you can, but also get the shot, set up the lens, make sure you're doing it the right way. Is there character acting? Is there audio? Isn't it post? So there's, I guess, the biggest thing, what skills are employers looking for? Problem solving.
Yeah, 100%. And I think problem solving, and definitely a basic understanding, especially if you're going into the cinema side of things, cinematic content creation, understanding film, film history, understanding, the changes, how we shoot things now is different from how we shot things 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So being able to track the evolution of, camera work, lighting techniques, all that sort of stuff, even things just an understanding of coverage too. And these are all things that tie in really deeply to not just how much time you spend in the software. And this is something that I talk to my students a lot about. And every now and then I get disappointed when I hear how much they actually do this, but it's media literacy in general, right? As creators, especially creators that, we're all inspired, whether it's subconscious or not. It's really important to just watch stuff. What I usually do with films or television shows is when I'm watching stuff, the first time I just like to watch it as a viewer, as an audience member. And, I will, especially if it's something bad, actually, or it's something that I'm disappointed in, I'll watch it a second time from a really analytical point of view. And I'll try to understand, why it doesn't work. Because a lot of times I've learned more from things like that than trying to explain the magic that's going on behind something that's brilliant and that's just transcendent, right? And I think, learning to view things very analytically without spoiling fun, of course, of experiencing something for the first time, but having that as a skill set and being able to understand, like, you know, it's very specific to like filmmaking side of virtual production. Like if you see a setup or you see a lighting, like, you know, lighting that you really like in a shot, like pause the frame and like try to think like, okay, where are they, how are they rigging this? Like, how is this actually working? A lot of what we do as part of our exercises too, is we take inspiration or literally direct reference and we try to do recreations, so we get an understanding of how all these how all these things come together, like, you know, in this, you know, like alchemy to make something magical, right? But one thing that I would definitely suggest is, like, you know, it's good to know software and it's good to have innate artistic ability, but you also need to make sure that you're saturating yourself with content, that you really have an understanding. So like you can tell, like a good example that we talk about is, like, you know, horizontal field of view in a lens, right? We're all really familiar, like lens camera system. We're all really familiar with people talking about focal lengths that they really like, right? But, you know, we live in a time period now where like there's dozens upon hundreds of different imaging platforms. So it's not just like 35 millimeter, super 16, 8 millimeter, you know, back to film standards with different Academy sizes or whatnot. Like, I mean, my iPhone is a, you know, Soderbergh has made a movie using an iPhone, right? You know, people have made movies using GoPros, you know, people use ARRI Alexas and Reds. It's like each individual one of those imaging platforms has different characteristics when coupled with different focal lengths, right? So it's the overall understanding of how all these values work too, to where you can really start visualizing things in a cinematic way. And the last thing I'll sort of say about that in terms of what people are looking for is, like, you know, I would love as an art test, if I'm going to hire somebody, I'm going to bring them in and give them a sequence where the performance is already laid out in a linear way. It might even be lit, but I'm going to ask them to cover it. Even if they're not going to be working in camera department, I want to understand that they understand how this all goes together, right? And at the end of the day, 99% of the work we're doing in virtual production, I don't want to say 100%, there's always going to be, you know, outlying reasons, but is going to be seen through the viewpoint of a camera, right? Or the perspective of a camera. So inherently then it's very important to understand, you know, how that works and like why it makes things feel a certain way. It's like, why does a close up on an 85 millimeter backed off far from subject with the same framing feel different than a close up on a wide angle lens that's like where the camera placement is very close to the subject, right? To get them in the frame. Like, because we have a thing called like roundness, right? Or flatness, which gives us a different emotion on the subject. So these are all things, like, as an employer, like I would definitely look for. I'd want people to understand those things and be able to explain to me, you know, because it is one-to-one in many cases. Like, you can do it in real life and you could repeat that inside of the engine. Will has a great video where he covers that sort of stuff, changing the focal length and the sensor size, right? Like, as you have that one subject in the foreground, and like how it like feels different with, like, you know, sort of going through the processes of like a Hitchcock zoom, right? And all the different sort of steps. And it's like, you know, it's really cool to me because like I can demonstrate that on a soundstage with the camera, a real camera and a subject and some lights, but I can also demonstrate that just sitting at my computer adjusting the values inside of the editor, which is like invaluable in terms of explaining things. But like I said, also even just learning and practicing cinematographic techniques can be done inside of this environment, eschewing the whole idea of it being like for content creation. You can actually use it to learn filmmaking techniques, whether they're camera or lighting techniques, without ever pressing render or like export. And that's what's so cool.
Deepak's excited about this.
I'm super excited. It's like the coolest thing. It's made my life so much easier.
Yeah. So,
It's always a pleasure to listen to Deepak. I can listen to him all day.
Oh,
I know so much good stuff there. It's like,
I'm taking notes here. Just like, okay.
You guys are too nice.
So some more stuff that kind of like touched on, like resources for people looking to learn the ropes, learning Unreal on your own versus through an academic partner. I mean, I can speak to learning it on your own versus an academic partner because I've been on both sides, and ironically on all three sides, because, you know, I work for the software and I work with the education, but also I want to learn. I find that, in my opinion, like working with an academic partner as opposed to working your own, it's kind of like, it's like having a trainer at a gym. It's someone to kind of keep you on spot, to help you with things when they get tough. And I find that oftentimes when we're looking for answers, sometimes depending on the person, we kind of get I want to say lazy, but like if we get too many roadblocks in finding these answers, it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, I'll try something else. But I feel like with a mentor or we're looking with an academic partner, it's really, it's more of, let's find the answer. Let's do this together. I have some experience. Let's talk about this. You know, Deepak just highlighted about a bunch of stuff of what he's looking for. So I feel like an academic partner brings a certain perspective that you may not have while you're living stuff on your own. And moving into real-time virtual production from other fields, like I'll say something first in terms of like just game development. I really feel like the reason why we're able to do this using Unreal Engine is because, you know, I started working in games using PlayStation 1, and I started using Unreal Engine 15 years ago when I was working on at Midway on like John Woo's Stranglehold. And I remember looking at Unreal 3 there, and I'm like, oh, it's great. And it looks so amazing. But then there was always limitations in terms of like, you know, the minute that we started adding characters or content breaking down or visual effects, the resolution would just kind of go down, the quality. But now it's like when Unreal 4 came out and with everything that's coming out with 5, it's like, cool, we have reached the point where I can show someone a still from a game and someone a still from a movie, and you cannot tell the difference. So I think if you're someone who comes from a gaming side that wants to move into virtual production, it could be, you know, there might be people who are like, I've been doing games for 10, 15 years. I want to change. I want to do this because maybe I've always wanted to work in film, but I didn't know how to get my foot in there, because there used to be a big division between the production of games and also virtual production. But now it's like there's this, the gap has gotten close to the point where like you can jump to the other side and you will have the same skill sets needed for that side. And same thing goes if you're someone who's looking into like architecture and previs. It's like there's a real nice hop and skip jump right into that one. But I'm curious to think. Well, I see like what you guys think. Like William, what do you think about people moving into real-time production from other fields beyond just filmmaking and games?
What's the question specifically? Sorry.
So what do you think? Like if you were to look at like people who are moving into real-time production from other fields beyond games and filmmaking, do you see like this a practical skill that people in other fields can actually transition from beyond games and film?
I mean, like you put it so nicely, just architecture for one. So ArchViz, more and more people are moving from, I wouldn't say they're ditching their offline renderers, but they're definitely being made aware like, oh, wow, like this can be done. This can save us so much time. And the interactiveness of it is also a huge perk, because like now architecture clients can just actually go around and interactively change color of walls, change their floors, and get a much better visualization of, whatever building or house they want to build, right? So there's a huge market for things that are completely not film or game related at all. The whole market of visualization as we know it is starting to kind of turn their eyes towards Unreal. This can be like, for car manufacturers, or just like trying to visualize what your car seats are going to look like. You get the fancy Italian leather or just get the default gray cloth that everyone has. It's just super nice to get a live feedback with great lighting, when no compromises, high frame rate. There's no it's kind of what you see is what you get in every aspect. And so this is just, I don't even think we know entirely in 5 years how many other industries they're going to be using. Is the medical industry going to be using this? I don't even think we've even imagined the possibilities at this point. So I think there's quite a few people are going to be making a lot of money, I think, in the next few years, if they want to figure out something like, oh, hey, there's a use case for this, we can use this.
Yeah, it's like product design, like if you're like IKEA or something, but also like I'm just thinking about museums and whatnot. Like,
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Installations, like
that's a good point.
Instead of like walking by that mammoth just sitting there with the painted background, where there's like get to the point where there's actually like an LED screen back there, and it's like you walk by and it looks like they're really like walking behind that and all that stuff. So I think we've already covered the traditional filmmakers converting to virtual production. So let's talk about these courses that we're going to have. We'll do I know we kind of burned through time talking about this stuff. So we're going to be joining. We're going to be apply by August 25th to get to the first September intake. It doesn't mean that you can't, if you're hesitant, you need more time. This is going to be courses that are offered. So introduction to real-time and virtual production certificate, and then real-time 3D technical art and virtual production diploma. So what are you learning in these? You're going to be learning from these fine gentlemen learn world building, lighting, and camera essentials, and discover how to create film quality cinematic shots in Unreal. That's a huge thing. They're gonna tell you all their tips and tricks of everything they've learned before they started virtual production, everything they've been doing with it, and everything that they're learning alongside as well, because they're on the cusp of this technology, which is very rare to find. Max 4 students per class with one-on-one mentorship. You're going to learn with an Unreal Engine academic partner, which means that, yes, we work so close with Unreal that it's crazy. Developed by real-time experts at the forefront of virtual production. You're going to graduate with an original portfolio piece. And if you guys want to get swag, if you sign up for the September class, you can get a free t-shirt, which Simon's wearing right there. And I have one, mine's in the wash, and I can say it's one of those shirts that you can wear all the time. So soft. But you know, this is rare. There's not there. I can honestly say, and it's just not me tooting the horn of CG Spectrum. There's very few places out there where you can learn CG, virtual production, especially like this, with people so ingrained in the actual virtual production industry and Unreal.
I also want to mention that there's more than just us mentoring it. Like there's we have a whole
John Robbins
roster of mentors that are ready to roll to teach, and we all have slightly different variations of where we came from, but we're mentoring based on that specific department. So yeah, there's a lot of good talent we've got, they're all just sitting there waiting to go. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I know that sometimes it's scary to invest in yourself, but investing in yourself, this is going to 100% pay off, because the amount of basically all these streaming services and studios, the amount of money, we're talking tens of billions of dollars annually, not just once. The content that's being created, and we're seeing this huge shift into creating content like this, where people can set up studios that are more small, where they can maybe have their own little LED wall set up to create this content. So to talk about the benefits of studying with us, it's more, we're focused on job focused career training and mentorship from industry pros. Like, we want you to be able to get a job, and working with us one-on-one and talking to people who are your mentors that are in the industry is going to be a huge asset to that. Flexible classes and scheduled payments, live weekly Q&A with their mentors, all recorded, access to industry insights, networking opportunities, 100% online from anywhere, which is huge to me, hands-on education. And, we've got a really good community. The amount of people that just help each other and kind of like inspire and push each other in creative competition ways, but just are there to answer anything above just the mentors and the staff as well at the school, is pretty inspiring. The most Q&A. So let's hit some Q&A. So what are the most common challenges for students starting out in Unreal Engine? I honestly think the most common challenges people have with any new software is just like, let's talk about the bare minimum. Like, most people always get caught up with like, where do I find it? How do I download it? That's the very number one. And beyond that, it's like getting used to an interface, and maybe using even the interfaces tools. Like, I know every single time I've gone to a new software, the number one thing that I like to tackle is just the layout of the actual program and where the tools are, and what the tools do. That's a huge one. But once you do that, it's going to be a lot of problem solving of like, what do I need to make and how do I need to make it? That's a big one.
And where to look, or like, where do you find those answers? Like, that kind of falls under the whole problem solving branch of the equation, but learning how to figure stuff out on your own is a big one.
Yep. That's it. And actually, that's a good point. And that's why I feel like, these mentorship courses are really important, because we're going to tell you as mentors ways to do that. We're going to hold your hand, but we're not going to hold your hand, because the most successful employees that are out there are people who can really hunker down and search for those answers, right? Mm-hmm. What kind of previous knowledge do I need to start in this diploma course? I'm going to throw it to you for that one, Simon.
Okay, well, that works out good, because there was a question that just came up asking a very similar point. So when you start the introduction part, so there's an intro course that's 1 term, 12 weeks. And then the diploma is a 3-term course where you have 3 12-week courses. One's with world building, one's with virtual production, and the third one is the portfolio, which you kind of get to pick what kind of mentor you want to have with you so that you can build something for it. One of the questions came up was, I've taken the intro class for Unreal Engine already before we built this, we have an intro class as part of Foundations. Would that be enough to attend the class? So the introduction term is specifically for people coming from a 0 point. So we don't know anything about Unreal. There's no previous knowledge, even like modeling. We don't have to have any knowledge to be able to take that introduction course. It would be really nice if you had modeling experience or animation experience or some sort of past. It will definitely complement nicely, but you don't have to start this course. And then it's a 12 weeks. So we teach you how to use Unreal, basics of materials, basics of things. And we get into like talking about rigging, talking about joints, talking about motion capture, building up that sort of animation side of it. And you're going to be mentored with someone who has animation experience. If you've already taken that course, then you can skip it. You can jump straight into world building if you want to. And we can offer you the extra weeks that we've built for it for free for you to watch. It will be unmentored, but you can watch those videos. So yes, you can jump straight into the diploma portion, the 3-term part, if you've already taken the course previously, to answer that question. But generally speaking, you don't have to have any experience to start the course. If you are able to demonstrate all the skills that we teach in term 1, we can review your portfolio and maybe get you to jump straight into diploma. But that has to be dealt with on a case by case. And but email the admissions team, hello@cgspectrum.com, and you can get answers to all these questions.
The next one would be: is their course relevant for environment? Is the course relevant for environment and theater design? Yes, I 100% think so, especially when we get to the world building, lighting, and staging. Are parts of the animation, VFX, and compositing covered in the course? Did you do that one, Simon?
Are parts of animation, VFX, and compositing covered in the course? Yeah, I think Deepak even has some compositing elements in his term. So
yeah, we'll definitely talk about them. So being able to execute them sort of depends on what additional hardware you may have. But we will definitely talk about in-camera VFX. But just to be very clear, though, like the way that we sort of talk about virtual production is we're still talking about it right now as a computer-based skill, right? So a workstation-based skill. Like there's no real way, in this sort of format, outside of conceptually walking you through what happens on a stage, right? There's not going to be sort of a representation of, me running through like a stage setup using like disguise software or anything like that. We're really talking about these techniques as they pertain to in-editor work inside of the viewport in Unreal Engine. But that does not mean that we will not cover other, aspects that, albeit in a much more, like I said, conceptual way. But everything you're learning here too, like on the cinematic linear media side, preps you for essentially being an Unreal technician or an Unreal generalist in that realm. So, while, being on stage or working in a stagecraft department is a position that falls under virtual production, there are other third-party softwares outside of Unreal that go into that process. It's not like a direct pipeline always from Unreal to your LED volume. So I do want to make that clear is, we're talking about content creation inside of the engine right now.
And we don't have a specific term for deep VFX conversations. So just to be clear about that, we don't have, we'd like to be able to put it in there, but that requires an entire term on its own. And it's a whole huge conversation and it's another skill set. So from virtual production perspective, these are the skills that we feel are highest priority to learn.
Yeah. So let's start answering some questions from the Q&A. One of them is, considering Unreal 5 is on the verge of getting released, are we going to be taught in Unreal 4 or Unreal 5? Reality is Unreal 5 is getting released next year, so we're starting in Unreal 4. Yes, you'll be learning all these skill sets. Some will translate, and then we'll be updating those ones. But 4.27, that sound right?
Yeah, we'll be in 4.27.
4.27 is going to be around for a while, guys. It's not going away.
Well, if you want to think about studio workflows, I don't want to speak for every studio out there, but so many have spent so much time, money, and effort getting their Unreal 4 pipeline up to date, right? So there is going to likely be a gap in many places in the industry, especially for linear cinematic media, right? Where you're going to see a little bit of a buffer time before people switch over. They're going to have to modify.
Yeah, it's like a year or 2 years, and sometimes more.
I mean, you're likely to see it for independent creators, Like, I'm making my short film in 5, but that's because I'm in control of the entire process, right? So for independent creators or smaller groups, you might see the shift to 5 happen way sooner. But a lot of the large places, including pretty notable companies have basically maintained that they're going to stick to 4 for the time being.
And for the most part, most of the skills that you learn in UE4 can be directly applied to UE5. Right. Like I can't speak for animation. That's kind of Simon's department. But for actual like lighting and stuff, most of that, yes, you get new tools like Lumen and such, but that's just one small part of the equation. Like for the most part, transitioning to from UE4 to UE5 is very smooth.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't want to have it be like such a gated experience that they lose their current fix.
And even from animation, it's too early to really be saying this is how you do things in Unreal 5, because it might just be different when Unreal 5 finally comes out. So it can give you some foresight, talk about it, but it's just too early to really teach it yet.
Ritik was asking, I'm learning environments from real film. Can we how to making environments for films on games? Yes, we're going to be doing that world building with William and all that stuff. We will be doing world building, so you're learning how to make environments for films. Those are all done. Can you elaborate on LED volumes? What are LED volumes and how are they useful? Deepak, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so that's on the other end of the spectrum in terms of the democratization of this technology. Those are installations in sound stages usually that will basically take tracked cameras, right, projecting the camera view into the LED wall or the frustum, like the field of view. Right. So if you've ever seen a behind the scenes, you'll notice that there's sort of like a little bit of a blur on the edge of the ideal camera perspective as being moved through the physical camera. Right. This is how you're getting stuff like Mandalorian, George Clooney's Midnight Sky, all those films that are being shot using this technology or shows. But that is the higher end of this. Right. So like I said a little bit earlier, it's like, we're going to definitely talk about them in a conceptual way. And in many cases too, hopefully by then I'll be able to point you towards some material to where, like, if you have a camera and a Vive tracker and a monitor, you could create a miniaturized version of an LED volume, right? Just using a tracked camera and end display to guide a virtual camera move on, let's say, your computer monitor even. These are all things we're working on that aren't necessarily in the course right now, but these are things that we're hoping to get in there. But in general, once again, that is the much higher end workflow that's being used on much higher budget stuff. So, what I think though, that it's going to revolutionize, coming from somebody who's done a lot of commercial work in the past, is, commercials, honestly, commercials, music videos, any short form content, especially high budget short form content, where usually the budget is because a company moves traveling all over a country to do a 30-second spot in 10 different locations. I think clients are also going to get really, they're going to get really clued in to the idea that you can do a lot of this stuff just in a virtual production stage. So, long gone maybe are the days where we'd go to Norway and fill something with Will, and we'd go to Chicago and fill something with Justin for a jeans ad. We might just be in Austin here at a soundstage with these environments created in the background. And instead of a 2-week shooting process, with travel and all that sort of stuff, we're getting everything knocked out, over a day or two. Right. So, the LED volumes themselves are used for hybrid in-camera visual effects. Right. I've yet to encounter a situation, unless something's gone wrong, where, let's say, they just green it out and like just use it as a green screen or something. It's almost always used to basically in camera present the visual effects elements that otherwise in previous workflows would have existed elsewhere or would have been done completely practically. So I'm sorry, that was a little bit roundabout, but hopefully it answered that question.
So next question, Sam was talking about what kind of hourly commitment per week is necessary to keep up in these courses? Example, for a week, new versus someone with several decades of experience and film experience. So if you're someone who's starting from scratch versus someone who's a little bit of a veteran, what kind of time commitment can we expect per week in order to succeed in this course?
That's a good question for Simon, I guess.
Yeah, that's good.
What I'm trying to figure out what the question is. So in a week?
Yeah, like
on a weekly basis, yeah.
Oh, how much would you cover in a week?
Yeah.
Or how much would you expect the student?
Like an hourly commitment, like, outside of it, like, should they have 4 or 5 hours? Like, my rule of thumb is if I'm doing something and there's like 150 hours in a week, and then, you have 56 hours for sleeping, 56 hours for a full-time job, like the leftover stuff. So like I come to think of it, if I'm doing this, if I'm being 100% honest, I would just be taking this and I wouldn't be taking other classes, because you want to give yourself, in my opinion, at least 4 to 6 hours a week, but I could be wrong. I don't know if Simon, you want to chime in on that?
Well, I mean, the way that we try to handle it is we want you to at least dedicate 20 hours a week to be able to get through the content. All the content, I mean, and what that's the bare minimum, in my opinion. Obviously, the more work you put into it, the better your results are, the more likely you're going to find employment. And it's always encouraged to try to put as many hours as you can. The content that we're creating is pre-recorded so that you can watch it whenever you're ready. That's why the course works really nice, because there's a lot of flexibility for when you can get through the content. And we try to build it so that there is some sort of task that you have to do, some sort of thing that you can work on, and you can just take that topic that we covered and build upon it, make your own content, work with it. And then the mentor is there to help you if you get stuck. And then you have your Q&A for an hour with your mentor to help them not only like get through the content that you've been learning, but also introduce new concepts, talk about things that are maybe not covered in the course. It's a really neat hour where you get to just sort of explore topics and things, and also learn. So that you're basically the weeks are kind of set up so that there's a subject that we're trying to learn. We cover that week, and we want you to put as much time as you possibly can into just learning and learning and learning. And really, basically repetition is what keeps it stored in your brain. So, you watch the videos, it's like, it's almost there, but until you actually do it and try it and play with it and work with it, it's not actually going to stick. So we want you to just keep messing with the concept that was taught. And then the mentor's there to make sure that you don't get stuck.
Yeah, that's awesome. Question from Kat. Do you see the industry expecting more and more people to know all the things in UE, Unreal, or will there still be jobs for letters in separate parts of the setup? Deepak or William?
Okay, my opinion on this is based more from a small business perspective. So I run a company that does XR and immersive projects, and we there's just 3 partners in the company, and we always hire out for any of our other positions. So from that perspective, not working in a very large, in terms of the stuff that I do commercially, I am always going to go for generalists, people who know how to do everything, because the issue is, if you're a great texture artist or you're a great lighting artist and you're on the project, but you can't do anything else, unfortunately, what happens then is I might not have anything for you to do for 3 or 4 weeks. Right. And the problem with that, like, just because, the industry's getting more and more diversified in terms of how many companies are out there, how many people are doing different things. It's a lot of times it gets a little bit hard then to justify keeping somebody on staff. Now, once again, just speaking from personal experience, but that is why, in general, when I'm crewing up on projects, I do want people that have a broad sense of knowledge. And, if we need to call in people that, they build themselves as just lighting artists or, just very specific aspects of different things, we're usually bringing those people on for a much shorter period of time. Right. Maybe, they come in to sort of clean everything up and do the final pass. But, then technically they're still not originating the process that's still coming from the people who we've hired as sort of the generalists. And I'm speaking once again, specifically to Unreal, not any other piece of software, because that's mostly what I'm working in now.
I kind of have to agree with Deepak. I think it really depends on the studio. It really changed from one studio to another. In larger studios like ILM or something, they can afford to have like a dedicated texture artist, a dedicated lighter. Like they can justify having the best of the best for an individual task. In my experience, again, like you, Deepak, I've mostly worked in smaller studios, and it kind of touches base with what we were talking about earlier in regards to problem solving. I've always been a bit of a generalist, and generalists can kind of figure it out. Like, oh, hey, this so-and-so is not working, I can take care of it. Whereas if you have a guy who only knows how to do animation and nothing but animation, he's not going to be particularly useful on your team, because, in the event of a snafu in production, as we all know, stuff happens in production, you get a bit of a pickle, you're going to need someone who knows the problem solving, and generalists are usually the people you go to for that. Unless, again, it depends, because then you can also go to a specialist on that topic. Right. So it really depends on the studio you're at. But in general, being a generalist will make your entry into the industry a lot easier.
Yep. Because if you all look at the job postings, especially for virtual production stuff, you're going to see stuff like Unreal Technical Artist. I mean, that's a really broad term.
Yeah.
like, that covers a lot of different things. So you're going to be expected to understand, especially if it's virtual production, sequencing, layout, lighting, probably basic materials work and basic blueprinting too. Because that's something we'll talk about and as part of my term too, is like, we're in an interactive piece of software. We're in a software built for interactivity. So, part of the convergence and what's so awesome about this is we can utilize those tools, right? Blueprinting specifically. I see another question in here that's about like C++. It's like, I'm not going to personally be teaching anybody C++. I'll be teaching Blueprint only. And that has sustained me for the last 5 years. It's got me jobs. Like, so if you know C++, that's great. But most people coming into this will not. And that's what I think that's another reason why Unreal is maybe, sort of taking the lead with this, because that's another way in which it's accessible, is the blueprinting system. I mean, I think in my entire time using Unreal, over 6 years now, I have only encountered less than a handful of times where I needed to go to somebody with, outside of blueprinting knowledge to achieve something. And it was usually something very specific that didn't carry over from project to project. It was just sort of a project-based thing.
Very cool. So Dana has a couple questions. One of them kind of feeds into each other. So basically the question is, with the class, as far as skill levels achieved, will you have the skill sets to get a decent job after the class? And do we help with any placement in terms of that?
Yes. I think there's lots of potential right now. This is a really exciting career path because it's like there is this huge vacuum of potential where a lot of studios are really interested in our course because they want to find out who's coming out of it so that they can hire them, because studios are switching over to this. Everybody doesn't know how to do it. And this is your opportunity to put yourself in the middle of it and go, hey, I know how to do it. And then everybody will come for you. So it's a really interesting course because these opportunities only happen for a little while where you have that vacuum, and we want everybody to get into it. There was another answer for a part of it, but I'll stop there.
So basically, after you guys take this, you're going to have the skill sets you would need to be able to successfully apply for virtual production jobs. And working with our mentors who are working in the industry right now, they're going to be able to recommend you because a lot of them have ties to these studios who are looking for hires. Hopefully that answers it.
We have support systems after you're finished as well to make sure that we have Maxine who's there to make sure that they give you all the help that you can. I, as a mentor, definitely am always there to help after the course is finished and say, hey, you want to reach out to me, you need some help, talk to me on Slack and we'll have a chat. We haven't even talked about the community on Slack, which is a really cool, interesting thing that nobody gets kicked out of after you finish your course. It's a place where you can communicate with other students and mentors and stay in touch with job postings and opportunity. So we really want to see that the students are succeeding because it helps us as well, but it helps you. So it's important to us that you find work afterwards and you get employed.
So there's a question, are there new classes going to start every year, or do we have a chance to enter every season? So basically, how often are our offerings of this class going to be?
So the way all courses work in CG Spectrum, you have a course that starts every month. So we call them intakes. They're basically every month we just start another set of courses. We have a very interesting yet very complicated system where we have intakes that all begin. We assign mentors to students of a maximum of 4 per class, and we just line them up, get them started on a per month basis. So every month you have an opportunity to get to start another class.
Yeah, awesome. And then we have a question from Andres saying, for a college student, should they consider learning on their own, or should they learn from online courses or through instructors and workshops? So, I mean, it really depends on you as a person. I personally like to use everything that's given to me in terms of, I like workshops. I like online courses. I like learning through instructors. I find that myself, my attention span is sometimes all over the place, but also I might hit walls and creatively and technically, and I want to be able to have that instructor to bounce ideas off of. I want to go to the workshop to like network with other people who might have the same problem. And I also want to be able to look for stuff on my own because, like William said, you have to be able to be self-motivated. So, it really is a combination, in my opinion, of all the things you just asked, because I feel like that's going to make you a better problem solver in the end, because you'll be able to find the solution on your own. You'll be able to, and that's a big thing. I feel like a lot of times students don't like to ask questions to instructors or to workshops. And I ask questions all the time in my professional jobs. And I feel like that is a skill to have these days that I never thought would be a skill, is just being able to confidently ask questions, but take the answers that they're giving you and actually use them. So hopefully that helps, but I feel like it's a combination of all of them. How much of the interactive tools and techniques are covered in this course, Mike asks. So for technical art and virtual production, obviously we're not covering all of them because it's still uncharted territory. But I feel like between William, Deepak, Simon, and a lot of our mentors that helped create this course and our industry professionals, you're going to get everything that's going to set you up for success, right, William?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I mean, the media is still linear, right? The idea is we're creating linear media, right? So we're not making a game, right? So we're using the tools through that prism, though, right? So like blueprint scripting, right? We can use to automate things in the background of your shot, for instance, like roaming AI or something. If you need crowd and you don't want to hand animate a path for everything, right? So we definitely will be talking about that stuff. Like in my part of it, we'll be talking about how to create virtual camera controllers. So you can use your Xbox controller as a virtual camera operator, right? Use the face buttons to swap lenses, focal lengths, zoom, depth of field, all sorts of stuff like that. So there's definitely an element of utilizing the interactive tools built into the engine to help assist or simplify some of the procedural creative processes, which is nice.
So Andrew is talking about, does this education contain how to operate an LED wall?
No.
It's a good question.
But,
I thought that one coming.
I was like, we got to talk about this one. Let's bring it up.
Sort of like I said before, as it regards to virtual production, is you will understand the analogous techniques from physical practical production to a completely, because I see another question here is like, is this about making animated movies? It's like, yeah, you can make a completely CGI animated movie inside of Unreal, but you can also learn these techniques to prepare you for hybrid live action, right? Because the techniques are going to be the same, right? Like understanding how to match, like, somebody's going to tell you like, okay, on the volume, we have said camera with said sensor size, film back, this sort of lens, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if you understand how to set that up, outside of the soundstage, you'll be able to set that up one-to-one. But we will not be covering end display and how that connects with third-party software to get stuff on your LED volume.
Yeah.
Plus, there's a whole argument about like we don't even the whole pipeline of virtual production is still up in the air. Like,
absolutely,
that is a wild west right now.
Yeah. I strongly
get one answer.
Yeah,
because there's no right way to do it.
Yeah, every individual stage that I've been associated with in terms of talking to people, finding out, like especially here in Austin, I know a couple. Nobody's using the same workflow.
No,
and in fact, many. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry. I was going to say, like, I'm in a few virtual production like groups on Facebook and such, and there's been actually quite a few people wondering, like, well, hey, like, where's the information? Like, how do we learn how to do all this? And people are like, are people hoarding information and selling it for a profit? I'm like, no, it's the Wild West right now. No one knows how to do it. People are just kind of in the process of figuring out for themselves and what works for them. And each studio has different pipelines and workflows and different skill sets, and it's just. Yeah, what complete Wild West is, it's completely lawless right now.
Yeah.
So
that's what makes it such an opportunity.
Exactly. Yeah, because here's the thing too. It's like when you go work for a place, especially if there's any sort of stage component, they have to onboard you to their workflow, right? But that's going to be made so much easier if you already understand the basics, the concepts, the integrations, right? Because then you're not starting from a 0 point at that point, right? You're walking in with sort of generalized knowledge for how this works. Maybe you're a filmmaker who's only done CGI short films inside of the engine, right? But, onboarding to any given company's own workflow, their own proprietary workflow, because a lot of these are proprietary. They have in-house people who are custom figuring out how to do this within their resources, right? You're just going to be positioned way better than somebody who's coming with zero background.
So let's take one more question, and we'll wrap this up. If you guys have more questions, please feel free, and then I'll show you some contact page stuff. Can you talk to us about the diploma and its credibility? How is it helpful for us? Thanks. I'll start off by saying this diploma is a representation of you actually going through a full pipeline of education, but created by people like ourselves who are actually in the industry, showing you everything that we know how to do with this and everything that we know is relevant that's making you have it. You're going to walk away with skill sets that you don't have, skill sets that people want. You're going to walk away with this one-on-one interaction, not only with the school, but with these mentors who are going to see how you're improving and just be like, hey, we need people. Hey, I know you know it because I just spent all this time training you for exactly what I would want you to do while hiring you. So there's that aspect. Plus, having a diploma, it's going to be like you have that on your LinkedIn, or you shared in, or you just say, hey, I've got this virtual production technical art diploma from CD Spectrum using Unreal. It's going to turn heads because Unreal is so in demand. Virtual production is so in demand. Technical art has always been in demand. Like I've been in the industry for 20 years for games. Every studio is always looking for a technical artist, always. And it's because it's not one of those like character artists, or it's not as fancy or like suave, but everyone's always looking for those problems. So I think it's something that's going to massively help you. It's not thinking, I actually know it's going to help you. And it's something where if a student came through this course, it's one of those other things that I know that we can recommend you, but what happens when you go through that diploma course and you apply to a studio, and what if that person you're applying with, it's like, wait a second, I know Deepak. How did this person do? Oh, they did great. Cool. Like you're speeding up the process, like, because it is the Wild West, because there's such a high demand, because there's this huge monetary input of investment wise, they're not going to be like back and forth, like, I don't know, maybe yes, no. If you have the skill sets and you can show that, and you have a diploma on top of that as well, cool, come on in.
I think it's worth mentioning as well that every single mentor right now is a working professional. It's not just a career teacher. It's not just someone who finished school and couldn't get a job and decided to teach instead. Like, no. Every single mentor is currently working in the industry right now. They know the latest and greatest ways to work, the greatest workflow, the best pipelines. That's the information they pass on to you directly.
And what I was going to say too, we have like 120 mentors in our school and in our Slack, and the job opportunities that come up are so like specific, but also like there's just so much potential. It's all about how do you find the connection, right? And that's how all jobs seem to work. But having those connections and say, I need somebody like this. Do you have anybody? And it's like, yes, this guy is really good. Let's bring him in. It's nice to have that network now where you can really like make sure those connections happen.
And that one-on-one, or even the four, because our maximum meeting groups are up to 4 people, but it really allows us as mentors and the school and staff to really get to know you, how you function, to really make sure. I mean, it's like, it might be a little bit scary, but there's no place to hide. You can't, like, it's not like you're jumping onto a course with like 30 or 60 people and you can turn your camera off. And like, no, we're there, and it's scary or not, it's to help you, and it's to really like be able to answer those questions and make you feel that you aren't vulnerable or you're not anxious. It's like, hey, we know that you're new to this. Let's make you really good at this. Here's the steps. And we've spent a long time carefully crafting this course to be something that is giving you all information that you need, but is also set up in a way that is approachable, and you gradually, it's not like we throw you in the deep end right away.
And like we're hiring professionals, which you're hiring them for their time, right? Like it's expensive, but we do it in a way that is really like low overhead, maximum value for the student. Like it is a really nice system because you're talking to these professionals who are in a very professional world and need to be paid up for what they're worth. And then you're getting that, and you're getting a good education. It's a really nice system.
Yeah. So thank you, William, Deepak, and Simon, for taking time. Thank you for everyone who came to watch us. I know we still have a lot of questions, but we've already kind of gone almost 30 minutes over. We have contact information right here. Please hit us up on, following our socials, hit us up on LinkedIn. If you want to throw any of your contact information into the chat, please feel free. Remember, August 25th is when the cutoff for September sign up dates, 25, like August 25th. So if you sign up for the September classes, you get that free shirt, and also more importantly, if you sign up for those September classes, you get to learn a skill set and in a thriving industry. When I say thriving, it's not going anywhere, it's thriving, which is good to say in this time of like our life.
Yeah.
It's skill sets that also kind of like translate into multiple industries. So yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed it, and that's all I got on my end. You guys got any last closing words before we sign off?
No, thanks for taking the time. Yeah, no, this is great.
Yeah,
It's always fun to talk about
You're
this
welcome,
stuff.
man.
It's nice to be able to talk about these things and share all this information, because I know there's been a lot of questions. We haven't really been able to really provide answers, but now we finally like, this is it. That's what we got.
Yeah, it's an exciting thing. I know that, you know, we have all the course stuff linked on the actual website as well, where there is more information on specifically what is covered. But if you have any other questions, you know, always feel free to reach out to the school. And for the value, for what it is investment wise, like that, it's honestly, it's huge. Like, I'm not trying to toot the horn of the school, and just like, it's something that you're going to massively benefit from in your career. And it actually could be something that changes, not to be so deep, it could change your life, because that could be the skill set that gets you into that one day dream job at ILM or Digital Maine or all this other stuff. So, you know, make a bet on yourself.
The dogs agree.
Yeah,
I was going to say that too.
The
Pugs are into it.
For just $5 a day, you can support Deepak's pugs. All right. That's all I got. Thank you everyone for joining. Cool.
Thanks so much.